Bedtime stories for adults. If, like me, some of your fondest memories are of being tucked in and hearing a favorite story as you drifted off to sleep, you'll love this channel. Here, you'll find gentle bedtime readings of my own books, narrated by my assistant May, in a soft, soothing voice designed to help you relax. No jarring sound effects, no sudden noises, just calm, feel good stories to ease you into sleep. If you enjoy these stories and would like to support the channel, you can also find all of my books available on Amazon. The Quest for Mangleclaw. Sergeant Don Zart and his raven-haired love, Nimicie, race against time in this thrilling continuation of the Quest Tales saga. Their mission is desperate. Find the fearsome beast Mangleclaw before the Realmshifters collapse and destroy their world. But this is no ordinary hunt. If they can tame Mangleclaw, they will transform him into Chili, the loyal companion destined to stand at Don's side. Along the way, passion deepens, secrets unfold, and the fate of the realm hangs in the balance. A tale of love, courage, and destiny, the quest for Mangleclaw is a journey into magic, danger, and unbreakable bonds. Recap. She caught up with me just outside Stormwind, riding a beautiful white stallion bareback at full gallop, and stayed right at my side till we reached Lakeshire, where we would stop for the night. As we rode, I smiled at her, and that's when I knew Nimicie would always be at my side. No matter the danger, no matter the quest, she would be right there, and for the rest of our lives. And that's when I realized I had indeed stumbled onto my destiny. Chapter 1. Sugarbeet. Rounding the bend to Three Corners and up and over the hill to Lakeshire, Nimicie shouted a hee-yaw to her horse to shoot out in front, determined to beat me to Lakeshire Inn. It was then I noticed a city guard seal burned into her horse's hindquarters, and I frowned and chuckled to myself, wondering where and what happened to the guard and saddle that had been on it before she stole it. Well, a few minutes later, I found her in the barn, brushing down her live mount and talking to it. "I'm sorry, girl. I have no sugar beets, but I'll go inside and ask for you. Then we'll send you home to Sergeant Dixon," Nimicie said while finishing the brushing on her horse. "That is a very fast horse," I said as I walked up to them. "And where and what happened to Sergeant Dixon?" "I'll tell you over dinner, dear. Right now, I have to go sweet-talk a few sugar beets out of the chef inside." She kissed me quickly on the lips, then turned and left me with her horse. "Oh, Don, this is Sugarbeet. Sugarbeet, this is Sergeant Don Zart of His Royal Majesty's King's Guards," she called over her shoulder as introductions on her way out. "Well, I guess we're waiting for her to get back, Sugarbeet," I chuckled while petting the beautiful white mare. Sugarbeet flicked her ears and gave a little whinny, as if she understood. I patted her once more and sprawled out on a few hay bales to rest my sore backside. My magic mount horse was very fast and hardy, but it wasn't the most comfortable of rides. A few minutes later, Nimicie returned, hiding something behind her back. There was a mischievous sparkle in her eyes as she approached the mare. "I have treats for you," she said in a sing-song voice, "but first, show me your teeth. This I have to see for myself." Sugarbeet tossed her mane and shook her head stubbornly. She pawed at the packed dirt floor, sending a puff of dust into the air. "Oh, please," Nimicie coaxed, stroking the mare's nose. "I promise I won't laugh. Let me see." The mare hesitated, then lifted her head and slowly opened her mouth. Bright purple teeth gleamed in the glow of the barn lanterns. "Oh my!" Nimicie exclaimed, clapping a hand over her mouth to stifle a laugh. She turned her head toward me, her eyes dancing with delight, and mouthed the words, "Purple teeth." I couldn't help but chuckle as she grinned, pulling out 3 beets from behind her back and feeding them one by one into Sugarbeet's eager mouth. "There, you've had your snack," Nimicie said warmly, patting the mare's neck. "Now go back home to Sergeant Dixon, and thank you for the comfortable and fast ride." She gave Sugarbeet a firm slap on the hindquarters. "Go." With a proud whinny, the white mare trotted out of the barn. Dust swirled in the late summer air, sunlight streaming through the open barn doors in golden shafts. Outside, I could hear the faint buzz of cicadas and the distant calls of children playing near the lakeshore. The warmth of the season clung to everything, heavy with the scent of hay, leather, and cooking fires from the inn across the road. As we walked arm in arm into the Lakeshire Inn, we were greeted by Braline, the beautiful, middle-aged madam and proud owner of the inn, Oh my, she exclaimed, her voice carrying across the room. A handsome king's guard and his beautiful lady hunter. She said it loudly, and even tossed the words over her shoulder, as though half the town needed to hear. Welcome, she added warmly, flashing a smile. I glanced up toward the second floor. A line of working girls had been leaning on the railing, curious eyes fixed on us. At the sight of Nimicie, however, they quickly turned and disappeared back into their rooms, doors closing behind them before she could spot them. Forgetting myself, I greeted Berline as I always did. I took her hands, bowed slightly, and kissed her on the cheek. Berline, my beauty, it is good to see you again, I said with a smile. The words brought a sharp look from both Berline and Nimicie. Realizing the slip, I thought quickly, scrambling for cover in memory. One particular weekend came to mind, an old Kingsguard cadet fishing trip Berline had hosted years back. Maybe, just maybe, it had happened in this realm too. Remember that Kingsguard cadet fishing weekend a few years ago? I asked hurriedly. I was the grumpy old sergeant who kept yelling at everyone, the one who stopped those boys from destroying your inn and terrifying your girls. I straightened up and raised my voice like I had on that very weekend. Gentlemen, remember, you are King's Guards. Conduct yourselves accordingly. My voice carried through the inn, and I seized Nimicie's arm, smiling broadly from ear to ear, as though the whole thing had been staged for her benefit. My eyes flicked to hers, searching for her approval. Berline's expression softened, recognition dawning. Oh yes, Sergeant, it is good to see you again, and looking so happy for once, she said, leaning forward to lay a gentle hand on my arm. But her eyes quickly darted to Nimicie, as if to make sure she wasn't about to be struck down where she stood. Nimicie's smile spread, slow and mischievous. She raised one foot behind her and delivered a playful sideways kick to my backside. The girls upstairs giggled faintly behind closed doors. Berline chuckled, shaking her head, and the three of us shared the unspoken agreement that, for now, the moment was saved. Hoping to pull my ass out of the fire, I said, Berline, might we rent your honeymoon suite? Have 2 steaks and fixings brought to the room with 2 bottles of wine and a keg of dwarven ale? I reached into my purse, pulled out 5 gold coins, and placed them in her hand. And if your nephew Mark is around, tell him I will pay him 1 gold in the morning if he'll play his wonderful violin outside our door for a few hours. I smiled and kissed Nimicie on the cheek. Of course, Sergeant. Top of the stairs, the whole left side of the inn, Berline said, pointing. I'll order your food and send it up, and I'll have the fire stoked for the hot water. Give it about 20 minutes before you try the tub for 2. Her lips curved into a knowing smile. And I'm sure Mark will be playing outside your door till dawn's early light for a whole gold piece. She leaned in close to Nimicie and whispered warmly, Good choice in men, my dear. With that, she sent us off. Scooping Nimicie into my arms, I carried her up the stairs. The inn erupted into a chorus of gasps and laughter. From behind doors and curtains, a collective and jealous "ah!" rose from the working girls who peeked out just long enough to see us disappear into the suite. The evening was ours, the warmth of late summer and the promise of a quiet night wrapping around us like a blessing. Chapter 2, Potato Pancakes. Carrying Nimicie up the stairs and through the doorway, she used her feet to kick the door closed behind us. She kissed me hard on the mouth, fierce and playful, before pulling back with a mischievous grin. Well, Mr. Zart, you almost blew it! I'm so glad you're not mad, I said with relief, smiling as I set her down. Nimicie walked straight to the massive bed, plopped onto it, and propped herself up on her elbows. With a coy look, she stuck one foot into the air, twisted her ankle, and gave me the pouty face I knew too well, her silent command to pull off her boots and rub her feet. This is becoming a habit, I chuckled. I walked over, tugged off her boots, and plopped down at the edge of the bed. Sitting beneath her feet, I began rubbing gently, working the knots from her arches. Dixon, I said after a moment. That wouldn't be Danny Dixon, would it? I didn't catch his first name, she murmured, stretching out with her eyes closed as she enjoyed the massage. Why? Well, he might be one of the few who remembers me. Growing up, Danny's parents had the farm down the road from us. We'd play together, go to school together. The memories made me smile as I pressed into her heel. Maybe, Nimicie said, lips curving. Sugarbeet told me a story as we rode, How she got her name. As a colt, she wandered into her human's garden and ate every last sugar beet without touching a single other plant. From then on, they called her Sugar Beet. I laughed at the thought, shaking my head. So tell me, I said, what happened to poor Danny and how you ended up with his horse? Nimicie pulled a huge pillow from the headboard and settled it behind her head and back. Well, she began, you had just taken off, and I was feeling very sad and a bit angry at being left behind to deal with your parents in their newly found love nest. I winced, but kept rubbing her feet, letting her speak. That's when a city guard rode past. He smiled and said, "Good morning." I was just about to warn him that his saddle had come unbuckled and was about to slide off when, whoosh, thud, him and the saddle toppled straight into a mud puddle beside me. I didn't hesitate. I jumped onto his horse, yelled, "Mom, Dad, I'm going after Don, hee-yah!" And we were off. I laughed out loud, shaking my head. Only Nimicie could make theft sound so noble. A firm knock at the door interrupted us. I rose and opened it to find a broad-shouldered man with flour dusting his apron, cheeks ruddy from the kitchen's heat. His eyes were sharp but kind, and the years had given him the look of someone well-fed, well-loved, and proud of his work. "Well, I'll be damned," I said before I could stop myself. "Sherman?" The man stiffened, tilting his head. "Do I know you, Sergeant?" I blinked, realizing too late that here Sherman might not know me at all. Nimicie arched a brow from the bed, already smirking. I cleared my throat and forced a laugh. No, just thought you reminded me of someone I knew back in training." Sherman eyed me for a moment longer, then let it drop. He carried in 2 heavy trays and set them carefully on the table near the fire. "Your order," he said evenly, though his tone carried weight. "And I'll tell you straight, Sergeant, you've overpaid by a long mile. For 5 gold, I could have fed half the inn and had change left over." Nimicie chuckled into her pillow, clearly enjoying my discomfort. "But," Sherman went on, his chest swelling with pride, "since you've paid for the best is what you'll get." He lifted the lid from the first tray. The scent of seared meat and garlic butter filled the room at once. 2 thick steaks, each nearly the size of a plate, sat perfectly charred at the edges, juices glistening beneath them. Alongside were golden potato pancakes crisped at the edges, glazed carrots shining with honey, and a loaf of dark bread still crackling from the oven. From the second tray, he revealed a crystal decanter filled with deep red wine, the color of garnets, flanked by 2 slender glasses already catching the firelight. "A vintage from the northern vineyards," he explained. Smooth, bold, with just enough bite to linger on the tongue. Finally, with a grunt, he set down a small keg on the side table with a heavy thump. 2 stout mugs followed. And, as requested, a keg of dwarven ale. "Careful with it, Sergeant. 1 mug too many and you'll be singing like a dwarf at Winter's Vale." Sherman poured the wine with practiced grace, the ruby liquid swirling in the glass like molten jewels. He set 1 glass before Nimicie, then 1 before me, his eyes still carrying that hint of suspicion I'd stirred. "Enjoy your meal," he said at last, bowing faintly. Then he stepped back, gathered the empty trays, and let himself out, the door clicking shut behind him. The room was quiet again, save for the crackle of the fire and the faint strains of a violin drifting in from the hallway. The scents of roasted meat, fresh bread, and honeyed carrots hung heavy in the air, promising comfort, warmth, and indulgence. Nimicie hurriedly pulled a napkin onto her lap and dove into her steak. "I'm sorry, my love," she said between bites. "This dinner is beautiful, but I'm starving." I laughed openly and joined her at the table. "Me too." We both tore into our food like starving dogs, laughing and giggling at each other as we feasted. The potato pancakes vanished in a blur, crisp edges giving way to soft, savory centers that melted in the mouth. Nimicie rose, poured 2 ales from the keg, and returned with the mugs in hand. She covered her mouth with her arm as she spoke, still chewing. "Here, Elle, save the wine for later." She set mine down with a grin, gulped her own, and returned to her steak. We cleared our plates in what felt like seconds, then leaned back, wiping our mouths, chuckling at our own lack of manners. That was when we noticed the plate in the corner of the platter, soft, pale cheese left untouched, Sherman's final flourish. The bread was still warm, steam curling from its crust as we tore into it. Together, we spread the creamy cheese thick and paired it with sips of the dark red wine, savoring every bite now at a civilized pace. The firelight danced across Nimicie's face, softening her hunter's sharp features into something warmer, tenderer. Her long, raven-black hair fell in soft waves over alabaster skin, her beauty stark and radiant in the glow. Mark's violin played on outside the door, the notes sweet and steady, wrapping the room in a coon of peace. Nimicie finished her wine, leaned across the table, and kissed me tenderly. "Let's get the road and the ride off of us," she whispered. "And try that tub for two." She kissed me again before slipping into the adjoining room. I stripped quickly, and on my way past the table, grabbed our mugs to fill them with ale. Her voice called back to me, playful and teasing. "Oh, the water is nice and hot. Hurry and get in here." I stepped into the bathing room naked, two brimming mugs in hand, and found her still fully dressed, lounging across a chair. She sat up straight when she saw me, her eyes darting down and widening in mock shock. "You got that huge thing inside me without splitting me in two?" She gasped dramatically. "Half," I said with a grin, lowering myself into the steaming tub without spilling a drop. "Well, what are you doing sitting there?" I teased. "Get in here!" She rose slowly, smiling wickedly. "I thought I'd give you a show first, let you see my fully healed body, every inch of it." She began with her gloves, sliding them off one finger at a time and tossing them my way. Then she unbuttoned her pants, easing them down her hips with a sway of her body before turning her back to me. With a teasing wiggle, she slipped them and her panties off, bending low so that her bare, shaved, glistening pussy was right before my eyes. I kissed her ass firmly, drawing a delighted gasp from her lips. "Oh, Mr. Zart," she teased, drawing out the words as she stepped free of the pile of clothing and sauntered across the room. She gripped the tall lamp in the corner, swaying and circling it in time to Mark's violin outside. Turning back toward me, she covered herself with her hands, only to slowly reveal that same glistening pinkness with a wicked wink. Smiling, she reached under her shirt and armor, sliding them upward inch by inch until they were gone, bearing the flawless alabaster of her body. She stepped closer to the tub, planting one foot on the rim and then the other as she peeled off her socks, keeping her legs spread, her shaved folds glistening in the firelight. At last, she unclasped her bra, letting it slip free, and with it, two brown cigars that tumbled out from beneath her breasts. I burst out laughing. "You forgot those were there?" She laughed too, scooping them up and heading toward the other room. "I forgot they were there," she admitted, lighting them both before the night continued. She returned to the tub, dropping the cigars on a side table, and slid in opposite me. Warm water lapped over alabaster skin as we both laughed, steam curling around us. "Tell me something," I said, leaning closer. "That story Sugarbeet told you, how exactly did she tell you?" Nimicie's lips curved into a knowing smile. "The same way your friend Kylie hears the thoughts of her bear. I can hear them, Don. Their voices, their feelings. Sugarbeet speaks in images and warmth. Not words, exactly, but I understand her." I stared at her in wonder, then laughed softly. "So you kept that gift quiet all this time?" She splashed water at me playfully. "Would you have believed me?" "After everything I've seen," I said, grinning, "I'd believe you could charm the moon from the sky." We leaned toward each other, laughing, splashing, bathing one another. Her hands moved over my shoulders, mine over the smooth alabaster of her thighs, until play gave way to passion. We made love in the tub, steam rising with our gasps and laughter. Later, dripping wet and flushed, we tumbled to the bed. Nimicie straddled me, her raven hair spilling across her face, her body glowing in the firelight. She slid down my chest, her mouth warm, her touch eager. I returned the favor, kissing her thighs, tasting her, worshipping her glistening folds until she cried out, clutching at the sheets. Then we came together again, a slow, sweet rhythm that built into something fierce and unrestrained. The world outside, the fire, the violin, the very inn itself, faded until there was only the two of us. At last we collapsed, tangled in the sheets, breathless and smiling. After a long while, Nimicie slipped from the bed, pulling on a robe. She fetched 2 ales, set one at my side, and stood for a moment watching me. I was already asleep, snoring faintly, spent from the night's passion. Shaking her head with a fond smile, she slipped a pouch of coins into her hand, opened the door quietly, and pressed 1 gold and 50 silver into Mark's hand where he played still. "For your beautiful music," she whispered. Then she returned, blew out the lamps, and slid beneath the sheets beside me. The fire burned low, the violin faded, and the night at last gave way to sleep. The morning came with a soft knock at the door and Berline's voice. "Breakfast is ready, Sergeant. Bring your lady down and meet the staff." We dressed and descended into the warm, bustling inn. The long table was laid with breads, fruits, cheeses, and of course, the golden potato pancakes that gave the place its name. Berline welcomed us with open arms, Sherman at her side. "Your sergeant here," Sherman said with a grin. "Thought I was a Kingsguard last night." Berline threw her head back and laughed until tears came to her eyes. "You, Sherman? A guard? Oh, that is rich. He can barely guard the kitchen from his own stomach." Sherman pretended to bristle, then kissed her hand, and she softened instantly. At my request, they told their story, how Berline's father had owned the inn, and when he died, he left no record of the world-famous potato pancake recipe. Sherman, a young chef straight out of training, had tried over and over, failing night after night. At last, on his final attempt, he begged Berline to taste them one more time. That batch was perfect, fluffy, golden, with just the right crispness. A week later, they were married, and the inn thrived under their care. The table erupted in applause as Berline kissed Sherman, her eyes soft with memory. It was then that the doors swung open and a griffin rider entered, dust from the road still clinging to his armor. "Message from Valdor," he barked. "You're both to return to Stormwind at once. Your mounts are waiting outside." I glanced at Nimicie. "Ever ridden a griffin?" She smirked, her raven hair gleaming in the morning light. "We'll see." Moments later we soared skyward, Stormwind's spires far ahead. I leaned low, gripping tight, the wind roaring in my ears, only to hear Nimicie's laughter above me. She circled once, twice, looping her griffin in playful arcs around mine and the rider's, her robe streaming like a banner in the air. The rider gawked. I groaned. Nimicie laughed all the harder. Together we arrowed towards Stormwind, the city of stone and banners waiting to greet us, and whatever news Valdor had in store. End of Chapter 2. Chapter 3, Kidnapped. The griffins spiraled down into Stormwind's courtyard, talons striking sparks as they hit the stone. Nimicie dismounted in a graceful leap, her raven hair spilling over the dark leather and steel of the hunter's garb I'd bought her back when all this began. Shadows clung to her like a second skin, every strap and buckle whispering of a huntress ready for war. I slid stiffly from my mount, buckskins creaking beneath my armor plates, and stretched my legs with a groan. A sergeant of the King's Guard should have looked more dignified, but griffins never made for comfortable saddles. The banners snapped overhead, guards doubled their posts, and the whole keep thrummed with tension. We were rushed through the gates, down echoing halls of stone, until we came to Valdor's chamber. The old mage hunched over a brazier of blue flame. Shadows curled around him as he spoke without turning. "You took your time, Sergeant." "Griffins don't gallop faster when you whip them, Valdor," I muttered. Nimicie's gloved hand brushed mine, her hunter's gauntlet creaking as she reminded me, silently, not to push too far. Valdor finally turned, staff in hand, eyes grim. "The Realmshifters move. Collapse will come in less than a year, and your family, Nimicie, is already caught in its shadow." Nimicie's lips tightened. "My sisters? Hope Mondor is safe," Valdor said. "In the city in the clouds, where magic falters. But Lola?" The fire dimmed, casting hollows into his face. "She has been taken into the Undercity beneath Trystal Glades, bound in magical sleep. Alive, for now." Her nails dug into my buckskin sleeve. "And Lepro? The gnome escaped. His inventions may yet help you, but not now." Valdor raised his staff, the fire forming the shape of a massive beast. "Trystal Glades lies in deep horde territory. Without stealth, without silence, you'd be dead in days, unless—" He let the fire settle into the image of a polar bear. "Unless you had Chili, the beast who once fought at your side." My chest tightened at the name. "You must find him," Valdor said. "Heal him for a week. Train him for 2. Only then can you set foot beneath the glades. Without him, Lola is lost." I leaned forward. "Tell me, Valdor, did you give the king an invisibility cloak on his 15th name day in this realm?" A flicker of surprise crossed his face. "Yes," I grinned. "Then our next stop is the king. After that, my mother." The throne room was quiet when we entered. Just the king, his guards dismissed, the air heavy with expectation. He rose from the throne, tall, broad, every inch a monarch. Sergeant Zart, he greeted. And Nimicie Mondor. At last. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. I've followed your story with interest. Ordered Valdor to fetch your service record from the other realm. His gaze weighed me, sharp as a drawn blade. A fine record it is. And for now, you have my permission to call me Anduin. Only when you need a friend, not a king. I bowed my head. Understood, your majesty. His eyes turned to Nimicie, drinking in her raven black hair, the fitted lines of her assassin's armor, the way she held herself like a blade unsheathed. Tell me, did poor Dixon ever get his horse back? Nimicie smirked. Depends on the tale you prefer, your majesty. Did I ride off on it after his saddle buckled? Or did I flirt with the good sergeant, undo the straps myself, and push him into the mud before galloping away? The king laughed, shaking his head. I shot her a disapproving look. A conversation for later. And you, Nimicie? Anduin asked, Are you still counted among my hunters? She straightened. No, majesty. I resigned my commission. Well then, Anduin said, his voice firm, Lieutenant Nimicie Mondora, you are reinstated by order of the king. Any minor indiscretions henceforth will be in service to me and blameless. Nimicie dipped her head, smiling nervously as she glanced sideways at me. I cleared my throat. Your majesty, I have 2 questions. One for the king, and one for my friend Anduin. He folded his hands. I'm listening. First, for his majesty, do you have good rapport with Magni Bronzebeard of the Northern Dwarves? Anduin's eyes softened. A childhood friend. Then, sire, I beg you request an audience for us. We'll need the mountain where Mangleclaw sleeps unlocked from the barrier spell that no living creature may cross. The king nodded once. Consider it done. And now, Anduin, his gaze held mine. May I borrow the cloak Valdor gave you on your 15th name day? Not for me, for Nimicie, so Mangleclaw won't harm her when we find him. Anduin strode to a hidden alcove, drew forth a folded mass of shadow, and placed it in Nimicie's hands. You rip it, you fix it. Her fingers lingered on the cloak, reverent. Oh, and Don, Anduin added, almost casually, tossing me a small white box. When you return, I want to hear from your own lips how you earned that. Every word. I caught it, tucked it into my belt, and bowed. As we hurried out of the castle, Nimicie's voice was soft, almost guilty. About Dixon. I cut her off with a shake of my head. Not now, Nimicie. I've got more important things on my mind. Don't worry. I still love you. I'm just a bit disappointed you didn't tell me the truth. Her lips pressed together, her raven hair shifting across her shoulders as she looked down. I gave her a half smile as we strode on. Later, I added, letting my tone lighten, while you're rubbing my feet for once, Lieutenant Ma'am. That pulled a small laugh from her, and my half smile turned into a full one. We quickened our pace through the lamp-lit streets of Stormwind, the high towers rising like dark spears above us, the air alive with the hum of merchants closing their stalls and guards calling shifts. We turned the corner toward our street and stopped. There, blocking half the lane, stood a massive buckboard wagon, the kind used to haul lumber or stone. 2 Clydesdales were hitched to it, and their feathered hooves striking sparks on the cobbles as they pawed restlessly. The wagon was already half filled with furniture and trunks, while the rest was stacked on the walk in precarious towers of chairs, tables, and bed frames. And presiding over the whole operation like twin generals, my mother, Bethan Hammersmith, and Irene. Their voices carried all the way down the block, sharp and commanding, one order tripping over the next. No, the trunk goes first. Balance the weight, Ernie. Careful with that chair, boy. That's oak, not firewood. Watch the paint. Watch the paint. Poor Ernie staggered under a dresser nearly as wide as he was tall, his face red as a forge, sweat pouring from his brow. He tried to obey both voices at once and looked like a soldier caught between 2 commanders, doomed to fail no matter what choice he made. I couldn't help it. I chuckled out loud. All right, Ernie, I called. The guard to the rescue. He set the dresser down with a heavy thunk onto the wagon bed and turned to me, eyes glassy. hair plastered to his forehead. With what little strength he had left, he raised a hand and gave me the weakest thumbs up I'd ever seen. Then, without a word, he slumped onto the tail of the buckboard and collapsed with a groan. Nimicie pressed her fingers to her lips to hide her laughter, though her eyes sparkled with delight. Is this always what it's like when you come home? Every damned time, I muttered, still grinning as we walked up to the wagon. I looked up, shocked. Ma! You be in buckskins! Bethan Hammersmith Zart, my mother, stood balanced atop the cart like a general surveying her troops, her hair tied back with a strip of cloth, hands on her hips. The sight of her in buckskins nearly floored me. This was a woman I'd only ever seen in dresses and aprons. The matron of the household, never once the image of a worker. Aye, lad, and would you be expecting a lady to work in a dress? She shot back, then reached down and gave me a firm love tap to the back of me head. Just in all my life, I've no seen you in anything but, I muttered, slipping into my best dwarf tongue, still stunned. She raised a brow at me, her lips twitching like she was fighting a smile. Come down, Ma, I said, opening my arms. I need to be asking a favor, and you'll no like it. Her eyes softened just a little, though her stance didn't. I braced myself as I lifted her down from the cart, kissed her hand, and led her toward the porch. Ma, come, we'll go sit upstairs and talk for a few over an ale. Together we disappeared inside. I turned back over my shoulder. Nimicie, Irene. Please, ladies, help Ernie. Both women hurried to poor Ernie, who was still slumped at the tail of the buckboard. They pulled him to his feet, kissed his cheeks, and without missing a beat began forming a line, moving the lighter boxes up onto the wagon bed. Ernie, red-faced but grateful, started shuffling alongside them with tired hands. Ernie! Where's Dad? Nimicie asked as she slid a trunk across the wagon floor. Oh, your father-in-law flew to Loch Modan this morning, Ernie said quickly, glancing at his pocket watch. Went to pay for the Zart Ranch, or what's about to be the Zart Ranch. Yup, by now, it's the Zart Ranch. He gave a weary grin. Nimicie brightened. Oh, Irene, Ernie, you must be so excited moving with Don's parents out to a ranch away from the noise of the city. When is your test, Ernie? Nimicie asked, passing another box along the line. Next week, Ernie began, only to be cut off by a thunderous voice from inside the house. I no be talkin' to that arse cousin of mine for... Bethan's words cut through the neighborhood like a bell. The pause was mercifully short, because she then switched into dwarf tongue, unleashing a stream of foul curses so colorful that even the church bells down the street seemed to echo her wrath. For 10 solid minutes she ranted, every word rattling windows and turning heads up and down the block. The Clydesdales stomped nervously. Neighbors peeked from their shutters, and still the storm went on. Irene and Nimicie hurried up the porch, arms full of smaller boxes, only to be stopped by Ernie's outstretched hands. Ladies, no. Let Don handle this, please. He looked at them with wide, exhausted eyes, his palms spread like he was holding back a tide. She's liable to kill any one of us who steps through that door right now. Nimicie and Irene exchanged nervous glances, then slowly backed down the steps, leaving me alone to weather the tempest of Bethan Hammersmith in full fury. I stood in front of my mother, hands on my hips, just watching. Are you done now? I asked, my voice cracking near the edges. I could feel the heat behind my eyes, tears threatening to spill from a grief that never quite left. But Donnie, what you be asking? She began, but I cut her off gently. I know. Ma. Okay. I took a breath that felt too big for my chest. I'm going to tell you a story I've never told you before, and I need you to listen all the way through. No interruptions, no more outbursts. Okay? She dried her eyes with a trembling hand and nodded once, the motion small and brave. I went to the doorway and called, Nimicie, Ernie, Irene, come in here, please. They hurried in, concern stitched across their faces. The women, seeing my mother wiping tears away, sat beside her and fussed over her like they already belonged to our family. Ernie gave me a tired nod and headed for the keg for a well-deserved ale. I paced the floor like a man pacing out the distance between what he'd been and what he had to say. Okay, everyone. Please sit, I said at last. I have a very hard story to tell, and I only want to tell it once, and then never think of it again. So no interruptions, please. I kept pacing, the words heavy as stones in my mouth, and then I started. We just had the funerals for Claire, my wife, and Bethan, our baby girl. I wanted to die to be with them. I was angry, hollow, crushed by grief. For the next 2 years, I threw myself at any mission that would surely get me killed. If I survived, I'd pour myself into a bottle and wait for the next chance to end it. Grief ate everything. It was a hunger I could not fill. One night, drunk out of my skull in Dunmoragh, I was with some dwarf friends. We were drinking, talking loud to drown the quiet. They told a story of Mangleclaw, the first I'd heard of it since the bedtime tales my ma used to tell to make me behave. I scoffed at first. He no be real, I thought. Only stories. But one of those dwarves pulled up his shirt and showed me the old scars on his back. Ragged, pale ruins of a fight that should have been death. He told me how he and 9 friends had come close to losing their lives. Seeing those scars, real, ugly proof, something in me broke further. I started thinking this would be a good way to die, to find the beast and not come back, to finally be with Claire and our baby. So I plopped my whole purse of gold down on the bar and told the dwarf to show me the mountain where Mangleclaw lived. He agreed, but would go no further. We met the next day, late afternoon. I had a 2-handed warhammer on my back, a bow, arrows, and the worst armor I owned. I was ready to die, in full, stubborn Royal Guard fashion. What? The dwarf led me to the base of the mountain, pointed out the trail, called me an idiot, spat on the path as if to ward me, and then left me there. And I walked up the trail. About 15 minutes up the trail, where the grass faded into permafrost, the world looked half asleep. The ground never fully thawed there, caught in a strange in-between, like dreams that never quite wake. Land of the fairies, I muttered, thinking of all the old dwarf legends I'd grown up hearing. I kept on until the trail vanished under my boots. I told myself I'd give it 10 more minutes. If nothing came, I'd head back, find that dwarf, and take my gold. But just as I was ready to turn around, the mountain opened up. A cave, huge and dark, a maw waiting in the stone. I slipped into a hollow about 20 yards out, downwind, where I had a clear view of the entrance. The air was sharp, carrying the cold musk of animal. I cupped my hands around my mouth and let out a low whine, like a bear cub searching for its mother. At first soft, then louder, stretching it out as the minutes dragged. It worked. The biggest bear I had ever seen lumbered into the light. His head swung side to side, nostrils flaring, eyes small and cruel in that massive face. I waited until he cleared the shadow and loosed an arrow. It struck where his heart should have been, and barely sank in. He roared, a sound that shook me to my boots, ripped the arrow free, and charged. Section 4. I fired again, straight between the eyes at less than 10 yards. The shaft bounced off his skull like a twig striking stone. The bow was useless now. I tossed it aside, grabbed the warhammer from my back, and braced myself. He came like an avalanche. I rolled aside and swung, catching his hind leg with a crack that numbed my arms. He spun faster than anything that size had a right to, clamped my arm in his jaws, and hurled me into a tree. The impact knocked the air from me. The world swam. When I opened my eyes, a paw the size of a shield was already swinging down. I twisted, and claws raked across my back from shoulder to shoulder. The pain lit me up like fire. I staggered to my feet, swung the hammer, and smashed the back of his skull. The shock rang through my bones, but I lifted the weapon again, ready to end it. That's when the light came. Blue, pale as moonlight spilling down onto the beast, and a voice, as clear as if she stood beside me. Don, don't, Claire's voice. My dead wife's voice. I froze, eyes darting, but the mountains were empty. Then I saw it, the old arrowheads buried in the bear's fur glowing in the light like stars burning under his skin. And Claire's voice again, steady, sure. He will be your greatest friend, and you his. He will be there to guide you and protect you. Don, don't. The hammer slipped from my hands and thudded into the snow. The light faded, and the silence pressed down. The bear collapsed. For 3 long days, he did not move. I stayed. Built a fire beside him, hunted longhorn sheep, and cut meat into strips. I shoved pieces into his mouth, rubbed his throat until he swallowed. Then I began pulling arrowheads from his hide, sewing up the wounds as best I could. On the 2nd day, he started to eat on his own. His great blue tongue flicked out, snapping up the meat I threw in front of him. I talked to him while he chewed, told him about Ma and Dad, about Claire and the baby, about the empty bottle that had been my only companion for too long. The third night, I leaned against him for warmth. My eyes closed, and when I opened them again, he was staring at me. Slow, careful, I reached for my knife. But instead of tearing me apart, his tongue swept across my face from chin to brow. "Okay, buddy," I said, my voice breaking. "You're welcome." He rolled onto his back, showing his belly, and I scratched until he fell asleep again. That's when it struck me. I hadn't had a drink in 3 days. I didn't even want one. The next morning, Mangleclaw was up before me, chewing down the last of the sheep I'd brought. "Thanks for saving me some," I muttered, grabbing my bow. He followed me out, massive shoulders swaying, and even nudged me toward a sheep I would have missed. If together we brought back enough for days. We took the long way out, avoiding dwarf roads and the easy trails, heading toward the swamplands. The cold was sharp, the days long, but I didn't walk alone anymore. I still missed Claire and the baby, I always would, but the weight in my chest wasn't the same. I had a reason now. A companion at my side, and for chapter 4, family never lies. "I wish my father had heard that," I said, voice raw. "He did," came a voice from the doorway. We all turned. Dad stood there, breathless, his hair wind-blown, eyes wet. "I ran when I heard Sweet Beth lighting up the street," he said with a crooked smile at Ma, then stepped in close and crushed me into a hug. "I'm so sorry you had to go through the loss of a wife and child, too." I swallowed hard, nodding against his shoulder. For a long moment, it was just a father and son holding on like they'd never let go. When I stepped back, I cleared my throat and looked at both of them. "There's more. We're going to need Magni Bronzebeard." Ma stiffened. Dad frowned, already following my thought. "Your mother's cousin." I need him to hear my story with family standing witness. The barrier around Mangleclaw's mountain, it'll take Bronzebeard's word to unlock it. And dwarves, family never lies to family." The room went quiet. Nimicie's hand brushed mine, steadying me. Ma's lips pressed tight. Irene and Ernie exchanged worried looks. I reached to my belt, pulled out the small white box the king had given me, and pressed it into Dad's palm. "I want you to pin it on me." His eyes shone. He leaned close and whispered, "At your wedding, son." We both nodded, as if sealing a pact no one else could hear. Nimicie's brow rose. Ma squinted, but no one asked. I let the mystery hang there. "All right," I said firmly. "We leave at first light. We'll see Magni before we head north. I want his word on that mountain." Bethan stood, brushing her hands on her buckskins. Her voice carried like iron through the room. "You tell me what needs doing, and I'll see it done. We are Zarts and Hammersmiths, and family never lies to family. If that mountain needs unlocking, we'll unlock it. If a promise needs keeping, we'll keep it. That's my word." The next hours were spent finishing the wagon. Everyone pitched in. Boxes, trunks, furniture, all finding their place on the buckboard until it sat heavy on its axles. Ernie, worn but stubborn, carried more than he should. Irene fussed at him while handing smaller bundles to Nimicie and me. Ma barked orders sharp as any captain, and for once I didn't argue. While the last load was strapped down, Nimicie slipped away. I noticed, but let her go. When she returned, she led 2 shining horses. A jet-black stallion with fire in its eyes, and a white mare so like sugar beet it made me laugh out loud. "For you," she said, handing me the reins of the black. "And for me," she added, stroking the white's nose. She grinned and tugged at 2 pendants hanging from her belt, gems set in silver, one black, one white. "Griffins," she explained. "Magic mounts. Wear them, rub them, and they appear, same as the horses, safe until we need them." I raised my brows, shaking my head with a chuckle. "Remind me never to play cards with you, Nimicie." Plans were made before the night was done. The Davis family, Ernie, Irene, and little Cindy, along with Grandpa Zart, would take the buckboard to the new ranch. Don, Nimicie, and Ma would ride the tram to Ironforge to meet Magni Bronzebeard. As we gathered on the porch, Dad looked around suddenly. "Where's Cindy?" Irene smiled softly. "She wanted to say goodbye to her friends. She's at the orphanage tonight for a sleepover. We'll pick her up in the morning before we head out." Dad nodded, satisfied. "Good girl, knows how to do a farewell proper." The lanterns burned low. The wagon stood ready. Horses shimmered into their pendants. Griffins waited in the silver charms Nimicie carried. And for the first time in a long while, I felt the strength of family steady at my back. Dawn would come, and with it, the road to Ironforge. Chapter 5. Ironforge. Grandpa Zart was up before dawn, slipping out quietly with the buckboard and 2 Clydesdales to fetch little Cindy from the orphanage. By the time we'd all gathered for breakfast, she was already back, bright-eyed and chattering away, saying her goodbyes to her friends and proudly clutching the little trinkets they'd given her as keepsakes. Now the wagon stood loaded and ready, Clyde stamping their hooves and puffing clouds into the crisp morning air. The Davises and Grandpa Zart perched on the tail, giving long hugs and kisses as goodbyes stretched out longer than any of us wanted. Nimicie scooped Cindy into her arms, the little girl giggling as she wrapped both arms tight around her neck. "You be good now, little one," Nimicie whispered, brushing her cheek. Cindy nodded with all the seriousness a 7.5-year-old could muster. Irene clung to Nimicie for a moment, whispering like old friends, while Ernie came to me, gripping my hand hard, his face flushed but proud. "We'll get the wagon to the ranch, Sergeant. Don't you worry." "Not worried," I said with a grin, clapping his shoulder. "Just don't let those Clydes run you over." Grandpa Zart pulled me into a hug so tight my ribs ached. "Keep her safe, Donnie," he murmured, nodding toward Nimicie. "And listen to your mother. She's always been the sharper one." I laughed, though it caught in my throat. Then, with one final wave, the wagon rolled away, headed out of the city and bound for the Zart Ranch. We stood shoulder to shoulder, Mom, Nimicie, and I, watching until the buckboard disappeared into the traffic of Stormwind. It was a fine day for walking, so we made our way on foot toward the tram. The streets bustled with merchants raising their awnings, hawkers calling their wares, guards changing shifts. But everywhere we went, dwarves recognized Bethan Hammersmith. They shouted her name, clapped her shoulders, even raised mugs though the sun was barely up. "Hero of Stormwind," one called. "Blessings on ye, Lady Hammersmith," roared another. Mom flushed crimson, waving them away with a huff. "Och, enough o' that," she muttered, looking like she wanted to sink into the cobbles. Nimicie and I couldn't help but chuckle, watching her swat at the praise like it was a swarm of flies, though I caught the ghost of a smile tugging at her lips. The tram ride hummed beneath us, its rails glowing faintly as the enchanted engines carried us deep under the mountain. Shadows and light flickered past the windows, flashes of cavern walls, glimmers of torchlit bridges. The air grew cooler, tinged with oil and iron. Mom folded her hands in her lap, eyes on the floor. "Magni and I—" "We didn't part on good terms," she admitted, her voice low. "In our world, he despised the thought of me marrying your father. Did everything to stop it. Canceled the flowers, canceled the feast, ruined the plans wherever he could. I had to scramble to fix it all." Her voice cracked. "He thought a human not good enough for his cousin, thought I was a stain on the family." Nimicie leaned forward, her raven hair falling across her shoulder. "But in this world?" Mom shook her head. "I don't know. Maybe it's the same, maybe worse. We'll soon find out." The tram screeched to a halt. When we stepped onto the platform, a lone dwarf guard stood waiting in full bronze plate, a polished sign held high. It read, "Bethan Hammersmith." Mom froze instantly. "It's a trap," she hissed. I stepped forward, hand brushing the hilt of my blade. "Name and station?" "Captain Brogar Stonefist," the dwarf answered proudly. "Ordered to fetch Lady Hammersmith and her party to the high seat. A coach is waiting above." I searched his face, but found nothing but steady duty in his eyes. I nodded once. He speaks the truth. Mom scowled, but kept quiet as I waved them forward. Together, we climbed the broad stone stairs and emerged into Ironforge proper. The city roared around us. Vaulted ceilings arched so high they vanished into smoke and shadow, forges cast rivers of molten glow, and the sound of hammers rang like thunder across the cavern. Balconies jutted like cliff ledges, banners of red and gold rippling above the avenues. And there at the curb waited the coach, a masterpiece of dwarven craft. Oak polished to a mirror shine, its corners capped in rune-etched bronze, wheels wide enough to carry a small army. 2 great mountain rams stood harnessed, their golden horns glinting in the torchlight, breath steaming in the cool cavern air. The driver bowed low. "Lady Hammersmith, Sergeant Zart, Lieutenant Mondor, straight to the high seat by the king's order." Inside, the coach was luxury itself. Velvet cushions, a silver lantern casting warm light, the faint perfume of lavender in the air. We sank into the seats, the rumble of the wheels carrying us past the markets, the barracks, the avenues lined with roaring furnaces. Nervous silence hung between us. Mom sat stiff-backed, her jaw tight. Nimicie's hand brushed mine, her touch steady but trembling. For all the beauty of the coach and the grandeur of the city, the weight of what lay ahead pressed down heavy. The wheels turned onto a broad avenue lined with guards in shining mail, their halberds gleaming like silver spears. Beyond the gates, the high seat rose in fire-lit splendor. When the doors opened, pomp and circumstance burst around us like thunder. A line of guards stood tall, halberds flashing, while royal dignitaries in silks and chains bowed low. The grand hall stretched before us, pillars as thick as towers, banners hanging high, the walls lined with dwarves of every rank and station. At the end of the red carpet, Magni Bronzebeard himself stood waiting at his throne. He raised his arms, his voice booming through the hall. Ladies and gentlemen, our esteemed guests, the woman who bound dwarf and human in everlasting bond, Bethan Hammersmith, and her entourage. The hall shook with cheers, the stamping of boots like rolling thunder. Mom's eyes filled with tears. She brushed one away quickly, but it was no use. I leaned in and whispered in my best dwarven tongue, "Ye dwarfs do a trap right proud." She swatted at me without turning, half laughing through her tears. We started forward, but Magni himself stepped down the carpet to meet us, arms wide. He embraced Mom fiercely, whispering something into her ear, then seized my hand with a grip strong enough to wrench my arm from its socket. He bowed to Nimicie, kissed her hand with surprising grace, and gestured for us all to stand with him before the throne. Then, before the whole of Ironforge, Magni spoke. He told of dwarves and humans who had fought shoulder to shoulder, of blood spilled and victories won. He bragged of saving my father's life more than once, and told of the first time he saw Bethan Hammersmith, and the love that sparked instantly, though forbidden then. "This woman," he declared, "changed the hearts of two peoples. By her strength and her devotion, she built a bridge no hammer could break." He hung a medal around Mom's neck, a medal of peace, and the chamber roared with applause. At last, with a wave of his hand, Magni dismissed the court. Guards, nobles, and onlookers filed out, leaving only family in the great hall. The last dwarf filed out, the heavy stone doors closing with a deep boom that echoed through the grand chamber. Silence fell, broken only by the soft crackle of the great braziers. Magni Bronzebeard sagged onto his throne, pulling at his beard with one hand, and groaning like a man twice his age. "Do ye have any idea the fuss and bother ye caused, sweet Beth, showing up here with your dead son at your side?" "Magni, Mom began, her voice uncertain, but her cousin silenced her with a sharp wave of his hand. "When me informants told me you were riding a common tram with your son and some woman, the whole damned city scrambled. I had it planned, I meant for a private audience. Wanted to ask questions about his realm. Questions only a man who's walked the other side could answer." He stopped, turning his gaze on me, eyes glinting like steel under torchlight. "I'll be getting to that later, son." Then he swung back to Mom, beard bristling. "But when the heroine of the dwarven people marches into me city, on a tram no less, every blasted attendant I've got ran about like chickens with their bloody heads off." He stood, arms locked behind his back, boots striking sharp on the stone as he closed the distance. He stopped inches from Mom, looking her square in the eye with a mixture of frustration and fondness. "When ye come to my city, Bethan Hammersmith," he said, voice low but carrying weight enough to shake the hall, "I want bloody warning." Then, just as quick, he leaned in and kissed her cheek. Mom blinked, stunned, utterly flustered. She opened her mouth, closed it again, and gave me a look that begged for an explanation. I stepped forward, bowed low, and spoke before she could. "Uncle," I said, and the word itself rippled through the hall. For dwarves, uncle is no casual title. It is a high honor, almost sacred. To call a man uncle is to grant him the right to rule your family in your stead. It means you trust him as kin, blood deeper than blood. To dwarves, where family is everything, it is a gift rarely given. In our realm, I continued, raising my eyes to meet his, she's just Mom. Oh, sure, Da gets the pats on the back for the alliance once in a while. But Mom? She has no fame there, no medals, no crowds, just Mom." A slow smile cracked Magni's face, his eyes softening. "Ah," he rumbled, sinking back onto his throne, the anger draining into something warmer. "Then a story you'd be wantin', is it?" He slapped his knee and stood again, all the fire returning to him in an instant. Come to me private chambers then. We'll sit, we'll drink, and I'll be telling ye all of it. He pointed to a side door carved with runes, stepped down from the throne, and without hesitation grabbed Mom's arm. With the familiarity of kin, he led her toward the door, waving us along with the other hand. Nimicie glanced at me, a faint smirk tugging her lips, and together we followed into the chambers of the Dwarven King. The private chamber was no small den, but a hall worthy of kings. High ceilings arched overhead, carved with runes that shimmered faintly in the firelight. The walls were lined with grand paintings. Dwarves locked in battle with trolls and orcs, dwarves feasting around long stone tables piled with game and ale, and dwarves kneeling in solemn prayer beneath mountain peaks. Each canvas seemed alive in the flickering glow, like the very history of Ironforge watching us take our seats. Servants rushed forward at Magni's barked orders, the harsh syllables of Dwarvish rolling off his tongue like thunder. "Bring meat! Ale! And the strong bread from the king's own ovens," he thundered, and within moments, trenchers of roast mutton, bowls of thick stew, and flagons of foaming ale were set before us. The smell of smoke, spice, and malt filled the chamber, warm and heavy. Magni poured us each a mug of thick, frothy ale, and settled heavy into his chair, the firelight catching on the gold of his beard. He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, and spoke low, as if the weight of the tale still pressed on him after all these years. "Beth, lad, Nimicie, ye must understand something. When ye were wedding, times for the dwarves were blacker than the inside of a mine shaft. Our people were starvin'. Work was scarce, the forges cold more often than they burned. Trade with the humans was thin, mistrust on both sides. Truth be told, when talk of an accord first came, it was not out of friendship, it was desperation." Mom sat straighter, her hands folded tight in her lap. I could see the memories washing across her face, the arguments, the whispers, the cold shoulders she must have endured back then. Magni went on, his voice firm. "We signed that accord because we needed grain, needed steel, needed coin, but none of that would have lasted. Paper and ink never fed a belly. What changed everything was you, Bethan Hammersmith. When ye married Jonathan Zart, ye did more than bind two hearts. You bound our people. That wedding showed both sides that dwarf and human could be more than allies. We could be family." He stood then, pacing a slow line before the hearth, his hands clasped behind him. "After your vows were spoken, human merchants came in droves. Our mines sold strong again, our markets filled, our children fed. The kingdom of Ironforge found its breath once more, and in every tavern and every hall your name was spoken with respect. They called ye the hero of Dun Morog, and they still do, Beth. Not because ye fought battles or swung a hammer, but because ye gave us something we lacked. Hope." Section 12. Mom brushed at her eye again, trying to hide the tears but not fooling anyone. Nimicie reached out and took her hand, squeezing gently. Magni raised his mug high, his voice booming now. "So I'll say it plain. The crown o' Ironforge owes as much to your courage and stubbornness as it does to any king's rule. Sweet Beth, ye be family, aye? But ye also be legend." He drained his mug, slammed it on the table, and gave her a grin that softened the weight of his words. After sitting back down, the king turned his attention to me. "Now, lad, Anduin in his letter told me of you being from another realm, and how you brought our sweet Beth back to us, and how he gave you quests. He also mentioned a story of a little girl that made him weep in his chambers for 20 minutes. But no matter. So I be guessing you're going after the Mangleclaw in this realm in hopes you can do it all again? Do you know the truth of Mangleclaw, or just bedtime stories? I be wondering." The king asked. "Well, uncle, it's not a story. I really did turn Mangleclaw into chili in my realm, and to save this realm, I'm going to need his help again. Only he'll be much younger and not Kingsguard trained in this realm. I'll still need him. But here's a story told to me a few weeks ago from a friend in my realm when I asked her about legends about cursed bears." I said and started. "Do you know of any stories or legends of a white bear and a curse?" "Not in human legends, no, but there's an old dwarf legend about a bear named Mangleclaw," she said, drying her eyes. "Would you tell it to me, please?" I asked. Then she began. "About 300 years ago, a huge white polar bear in the mountains of Dun Morog came back to his cave with a kill for his sow and 3 cubs. Finding his sow and cubs missing, and nothing but their blood and entrails and the smell of dwarfs all over the cave, The bear went mad with rage and pain for the loss of his family. He followed the smell and trail to a mid-sized dwarven village, and there he waited for dark. As soon as the last light in the last house went out, he started his killing spree. Killing every man, woman, and child in the village, tearing them to bloody shreds save one, a baby. And after leaving his blood-soaked claw marks in every door, he slowly dragged a dead man and the live baby back to his cave, leaving a clear blood trail in the snow, and left them both at the entrance and waited. It wasn't long till the baby's cries could be heard echoing through the mountains for miles. One raiding party came, and he killed them all. Then another, and he killed them too. They came shooting him and hitting him with hundreds of arrows, but he just wouldn't die. Some even said he was protected by the gods. Wave after wave of dwarfs came, maddened by that baby's cry, only to meet their end in the claws and teeth of Mangleclaw. Eventually, the baby died, and fewer dwarfs came to meet their end. Till one brave raiding party of 5 dwarves, one of whom was a great healer and white magic user. Standing at the back of the party, he cast spell after spell to heal his men till there were no more men to heal. Backing away slowly, the great healer, now out of magic, begged the huge bear for his life and swore he'd never return. But Mangleclaw did not listen, and with one swipe of his paw, cut the healer in half. As the great healer lay bleeding and cut in two, and as he died, he summoned all his magic not to heal himself, but to curse the bear to live forever and never sleep again, only to spend each night lying awake with thoughts of every dwarf he ever killed, haunting his memory forever. She took a sip of her ale, then continued. Being that the healer was indeed a kind man, he added this to his curse, that if any dwarf should ever show kindness to Mangleclaw, the curse would be broken. She finished and then said as she put her ale on my desk, "Now, this is just a guess, Sergeant, and a guess that would never leave this room. But I would say a young Kingsguard came across a large polar bear who was very willing and eager to die and would put up just enough of a fight to get that Kingsguard to kill him. But instead of killing the polar bear, even though he could have, he showed mercy on him and nursed his wounds, stitched up his holes, and pulled hundreds of rusted old arrowheads from his thick hide, then again stitched up every hole. Maybe even sat with him and built a fire and shared his food and water with the bear." She said and continued, "And if this young Kingsguard was half dwarf and could grow a red beard in less than a week, though he looked human, he would be able to break such a curse and have a very grateful, very loyal polar bear who may like to sleep a lot, now that he could, as a friend." She said as she looked me in the eye, "But that's just a silly guess on how a silly tale would end," she said as she smiled. And that's exactly what happened. I had no idea that Chili, Mangleclaw, was that old. In my realm, Chili found a girlfriend, a beautiful black mountain grizzly half his size, so I set him free, not realizing how much I might need him here. So I'm hoping you'll remove the magic that locks the mountain and let me try to get my friend back," I said as I looked at him with hope and desperation in my eyes. Magni leaned back in his chair, stroking his beard slowly, his eyes narrowing as he considered my words. The firelight caught the gold clasps in his braids, sending sparks of light dancing across his face. "Aye, lad, you've spun a tale fit for any hall. But this be no tavern yarn. You're asking me to risk dwarven lives, dwarven honor, on a cursed beast that slaughtered our kin." His gaze shifted to Mom, and for a moment the weight of a king seemed to soften into the weight of a cousin. "Beth, ye ken what he asks? Do you trust your son in this?" Mom's voice was steady, though her hands twisted in her lap. "I do. He's faced that bear before. Faced worse. If Donnie says he can turn Mangleclaw back into Chili, then I believe him." Let out a long rumble of a sigh, then slammed his tankard down so hard foam splashed across the table. "Stone and storm, always the stubborn Zarts. Fine then, lad. You'll have your chance, but you'll do it by my rules." He jabbed a thick finger toward me, his voice rising like a hammer striking an anvil. 1 week. Hammerlock will break the wards at dawn and you'll have 7 days. No more. At the end of that, the mountain seals again, tighter than a dwarf's purse. If you're still inside, you'll lie there with the beast till the end of time. The room fell silent, the crackle of the fire the only sound. Nimicie reached for my hand under the table, her fingers warm, steadying. I swallowed hard, nodding. "Understood, Uncle. 1 week will be enough." Magni's eyes bored into mine, sharp as a pick striking ore. Then slowly, he leaned back and let out a booming laugh that shook the walls. Men plan, lad, but kings chuckle. Remember that. Ye'd best hope the Stonefather chuckles kindly on ye. With that, he raised his mug high. To fools and their courage, may the mountain judge ye fair. The chamber erupted in the clash of mugs, the roar of voices, and the thunder of boots against stone. And just Chapter 6. Men plan and kings chuckle. Magni sat back in his chair, his belly half full of food and ale, scratching at his beard while the firelight flickered across the stone walls. The chamber we sat in was no common hall. The walls were lined with massive paintings of dwarves in battle, dwarves feasting, dwarves praying before stone altars. Grand tapestries hung heavy from the rafters, each threaded with gold and crimson. The air smelled of roast boar, spiced cheese, and smoke from the braziers set along the walls. Tankards of ale sat ready, the foam still clinging to their lips. Magni grunted, rolling his shoulders. Do you know what ye be askin', lad? Unlockin' that mountain and freein' that bear, if he still be alive, would be spittin' in the face of a lot of dwarves who feel he got what he deserves. Oh no, uncle. I don't want it publicly known. Best if Mangleclaw stays on that mountain, I said as I stood, walked over, and sat in the chair across from him. No, if I tame him, and he doesn't kill us, we'll take him over the mountains to the swamplands, using old trails no one's walked in hundreds of years. Then once in the swampland, a steamship to Grizzly Hills in the north, and I'll train him for a month or so till I know he's done with harming humans and dwarves. Then, if we ever come through dwarf lands in the years ahead, I've got this. I fumbled through my rider's pouch and pulled out Chili's magic muzzle and leash, a small red disc with the Bronzebeard symbol in gold upon it, and handed it to the king. Magni took it, eyes widening as he turned it over in his hands. Where did ye get this? From you, uncle. In my realm. And to soften his mood, I added, Would you like to be hearing the tale? The king held the muzzle in his left hand and grabbed his mug of ale with his right. He leaned back, fixing his sharp eyes on me. Grabbing the mug next to his, I leaned back in my chair as well. Now, let's see. It was a few years ago. Me and Chili were on our way to see Ma and had to go through the King's Valley, and Chili be wearing that muzzle ye beholden. We had more than a few guards ride past with weapons drawn, but your symbol on Chili's chest stopped any would-be attackers till... Unfortunately, we did pick up 2 rather unpleasant guards, who at first rode past us on their bighorn sheep mounts, but then pulled in behind us and started taunting Chili. The only good bear, be a dead one, yelled one of them. Aye, that's a handsome collar you got there. Where'd you steal it? From the other. In my best dwarf accent, and since I grew up here it was pretty good. I yelled back at the guards, It new be stolen! A gift from His Greatness himself, Mangy Bronzebeard. Will ya lads like to hear the tale as we ride? Come to, and I'll be tellin'. Now, no self-respecting dwarf would ever give up the chance of a free story, no matter what the danger. With Chili on my left, I pulled to the left side of the road so the 2 guards could pull up on my right side. Looking straight ahead and not making eye contact like a true dwarf, I started my story. This here be Chili. I be Sergeant Don Zart, formerly of the King's Guard, retired, in Stormwind, here to visit me mum, Bethan Zart, formerly Bethan Hammersmith. I glanced over to see a reaction. I a half-breed, would your story be half-true as well? The further one asked. I knew be tellin' then, I said. Shut up, Beardsby. I want to know, said the closer one, then turned to me. Go on, lad. I know your mum stood shoulder to shoulder with your da. May the angels preserve. Quite the compliment from a dwarf, but then I think he meant it that way, so I'd tell my story. So I continued, told them the story of how when Chili and I were much younger, and at Sos Peak, a rather famous battle where both human and dwarf stood shoulder to shoulder against 2 battalions of orcs and trolls. In my best dwarven accent, which I won't be using here since, unless you know the dialect, is kind of hard to understand. Anyway, I told them how I was up a tree with my bow, Chili out front in the heat of the battle, and a pillbox full of dwarfs with blunderbusses right under the tree I was in. A troll warlock's firebolt got past my arrow and went right into the bunker, blowing it sky high and knocking me out of my tree. When I came to, I could hear the lads inside the bunker cooking alive, so I tried to break down the door. Be it locked, blocked, or melted, I could not get it open. I yelled for Chili, who went through the bunker door like butter. 5 brave and wounded dwarfs made it out alive and continued to fight. One with a blunderbuss with the stock burnt clean off. He'd fire it, drop it in the snow to cool, pick it up, and fire it again, just as fast as the lads next to him. Well, the battle was over, the day won, and that night at camp, while everyone was celebrating, I was sitting by a small campfire sewing up Chili's wounds from the day while he slept. When Mangy Bronzebeard and an entourage of 10 dwarfs quietly encircled me and Chili, I thought I was dead for missing that flare. I immediately stopped sewing up Chili, got to my knees, and bowed before the king. Your Majesty, I assure you, the arrow for the flare missed, but the one for that mage's heart didn't. Shut up, boy, ordered Bronzebeard, and he threw a small red amulet on top of my sewing kit on the ground. I heard what you and that bastard White Bear did for my men today, he said as he took a step towards me, looking me in the eye. I had my wizard make that for your bear. You take it and press it against his chest whenever you are in dwarf territory. You may not be welcome, but no dwarf will ever harm your bear while he wears my symbol. He then put his hand on my shoulder. You deserve better, lad, but it's the best I can do for you and your brave pet. And as quickly and quietly as they came, they were gone. My best guess is that the king felt a public honor, for Chili would be a spit in the face of all the dwarfs that lost their lives to Mangleclaw. And that, lads, is how Chili got his collar. I took a glance at both guards with a smile on my face, then turned to face forward, in true dwarf fashion. The further guard found a skin of ale under his saddle that apparently was not there when they pulled up and we all shared a drink. Then the 2 guards took a long, hard look at Chili, turned their mounts, and slowly started down the road in the direction they were first going. I heard one guard whisper to the other, I no care what the half-breed calls him. That's Mangleclaw. I took a long gulp of my ale and looked at the king. Ha! Said the king, put down his mug and slapped his knee. That be a good story, lad, he said with a smile, then turned to my mother. Sweet Beth, your son tells a good story, your influence to be sure, cousin. Aye, and one I no be hearing before, she said, gleaming at me like I just stole one of her chickens. I chuckled. Sorry, Ma, I was sure I told you that story while Linda was at the ranch. Who's Linda? Nimicie asked, looking at me and crossing her arms. A slut that be after me, Donnie here. But no worries, darlin'. I shooed her away from me, Donnie, knowin' his heart belonged to you. Mom patted Nimicie on the knee. And Magni, I no be chasing bears with these kids. I be staying here with you for a day or two till me sweet soldier boy Johnny bring the cart to the new Zart ranch in Lochmoden. And I'll be expecting you and a few of your staff for Winter's Festival this year. Anduin will be there. And Mr. Valdor, if you please, Mom said, looking between Nimicie, Magni, and me. I'd say you're in a bit of trouble with your woman, lad. The king smiled and sipped his ale. And thank you, sweet Beth. I'll be there with bells on. Glad you be stayin'. A few days. We'll get this bear business out of the way, and I'll show you my city proper. He slammed his now empty mug on the table. Well then, I be givin' me answer in the mornin'. Mrs. Potter's, rooms for everyone. The king bellowed at the doors. The tall oaken doors swung wide, and in bustled Mrs. Potter's, the king's formidable staff manager. She was a stout woman, not a dwarf but human, gray hair tied up in a severe bun, a ledger tucked under one arm, and a ring of brass keys that jingled with every step. Her dress was practical yet fine, with a dwarven crest embroidered at the collar, and her sharp eyes could cut through stone walls. She carried herself like a general running a barracks, and the guards seemed to snap straighter when she passed. Good night, kids, and sweet Beth, ye be stayin' and liftin' a few more mugs with me? Magni asked, softer now, his grin full of warmth. Mom nodded. Nimicie and I bowed to the king, kissed Mom, and followed Mrs. Potter's out. Her keys clinked and her shoes clicked against the polished stone as she led us down a long, torchlit hall toward our chambers. Chapter 7. The Clock of the Mountain. The room they had been given was no ordinary guest chamber. It was carved from living stone, yet softened with tapestries and velvet drapes the color of garnet and sapphire. Chandeliers of wrought iron held flickering crystals that glowed like captured starlight, throwing warmth into every corner. Along the walls hung grand paintings, dwarves in their glory. in the thick of battle, lifting tankards at feast tables, kneeling in prayer before mountain shrines. Every brushstroke told a story of endurance, pride, and faith. At the center of it all, a bed fit for royalty stood raised on a stone dais. Heavy furs and deep red quilts made it look both regal and inviting. A fire roared in the hearth, casting shadows that danced across the chamber. A tray of food and spiced ale had been set out by Mrs. Potters herself, the king's tireless staff manager, who with her sharp eyes and sharper tongue made sure no guest ever wanted for anything. Nimicie leaned against me at the door, her raven hair spilling down over her shoulders, her eyes glittering in the glow of the fire. "I'd say we're even for our stern talks scheduled for later," I teased, kissing her neck, then her ear, and finally her lips. She kissed me back hard and, with a laugh, spun us around, steering me straight for the bed. She pushed me back onto the mattress and dropped to her knees between mine, mischief bright in her eyes. "Speak Dwarven to me," she whispered, tugging at my belt. The heat she stirred in me left me fumbling for words, managing only gasps and half sounds. She laughed softly. "You didn't say anything." "Oh, you think it's easy, do you?" I grinned, leaping up to catch her at the hips. With a playful growl, I tossed her onto the bed, stripping away the last of her clothes. Dropping to my knees, I echoed her challenge with a smile. "Speak Dwarven to me." Nimicie propped herself up on her elbows, her voice trembling with both humor and rising passion. I be lovin' you, Mr. Zart, and be lovin' what ye be doing to me. Much better than a wee foot rub, I. Her words broke off in a cry of delight. "Oh, Don!" The night blurred into fire and laughter, cries and whispered promises. Sheets tangled, hearts raced, and the stone walls of Ironforge themselves seemed to hold their breath around us. When at last the storm passed, we collapsed together, tangled in warmth in each other's arms. Later, with the tray of food between us, I chuckled as I sipped my spiced ale. "I can't believe you did it. You got out a whole sentence in dwarf." "Oh, it no be easy, Mr. Zart," she replied with a tired laugh, sipping her own mug. I gathered the mugs and tray, set them aside on the night table, then turned back and kissed her again. We made love one more time before drifting into a deep, peaceful sleep. The first light of dawn crept through the high arched windows, painting the chamber in a soft golden glow. The fire had burned to embers, its warmth fading, but Nimicie's body against mine kept the chill at bay. She stirred slightly, her raven hair spilling across the pillow, her breathing slow and steady. For a long while, I simply watched her, this fierce huntress who had followed me into every danger, who had healed parts of me I thought forever broken, now lying at peace as if the world had surrendered. A heavy knock shattered the quiet. Mrs. Potter's sharp, no-nonsense voice rang from beyond the door. "Up with you, Sergeant Zart! Lady Nimicie!" "His Majesty does not wait, and breakfast will not eat itself," I groaned, pulling myself from the furs, and slid into my buckskins, the leather still carrying the scent of last night's fire. Nimicie rose more gracefully, fastening her hunter's armor with practiced hands. She caught my eye and smirked, the memory of the night before flickering between us like a secret flame. Mrs. Potters bustled ahead of us down the winding, torchlit corridors, her skirts swishing, her keys clattering at her belt. She was a small woman, gray hair pinned in a bun, but she carried herself like a general leading an army. Servants bowed as she passed, and even the guards straightened. Clearly, she was a force few dared cross. The grand doors of the audience hall swung open at our approach. Inside, the chamber rose in magnificence. High vaulted ceilings lost in shadow, walls lined with towering banners of the Bronzebeard crest. Between the banners hung vast paintings, dwarves in battle, dwarves at feasts, dwarves in prayer. The floor was a sea of red carpet, flowing like blood straight toward the throne. At its heart stood King Magni Bronzebeard, stout and strong, his beard braided with golden clasps, his crown heavy with gems mined from his own mountains. He stood waiting, his grin both welcoming and mischievous, his blue eyes sharp as steel. Beside him lingered a figure draped in steel blue robes, his long silver-streaked beard shimmering in the torchlight, his staff crowned with a crystal that hummed with restrained power. Magni gestured broadly. "This lad be Hammerlock, me court wizard, the one with hands steady enough and power strong enough to do what ye ask." Flanking the throne were 5 dwarves in shining plate, the king's elite guard. Each bore axe or hammer hath, their faces weathered as stone cliffs. One of them, a scarred veteran, caught my eye. I knew that face. In my realm, he had been both rival and friend. Here, his loyalties were still a question. Magny's grin widened as if he'd seen the recognition in me. Aye, lad, ye ken the look of him, eh? But remember, this be no the world ye came from. Men who befriend there may not befriend here. He chuckled, but his words carried weight. Then the king leaned forward, folding his hands across his belt. His voice dropped to something harder, more deliberate. Now, Don Zart, ye be wantin' Mangleclaw, and I'll grant ye the chance. But not without rules, provisos that are iron-bound, not for haggling. The chamber hushed, all eyes fixed on him. Hammerlock will break the wards and unlock the mountain, Magny said, his voice carrying through the vaulted hall. But only for 1 week. No more. My entourage will camp at the base, hunt and fish while ye make your attempt. At the week's end, he'll seal it again, and not just the cave. 5 miles in every direction will be stone-bound. If ye and your lass be still inside, then you'll be corpses locked in the mountain till the end of days. The torches hissed. The silence pressed heavy. Even Nimicie's hand on my arm could not soften the weight of it. The words hung in the air like iron chains, and for a long moment, no one spoke. The firelight flickered across Hammerlock's staff, the crystal pulsing with a slow heartbeat as if it, too, waited for my answer. I met Magny's gaze and nodded once. A week will be enough. I'll not waste your trust, uncle. The king's beard twitched with a half-smile, half-chuckle. Aye, ye'd best not. Your mother would tan me hide if I let you walk to your death without fair warning. Before I could respond, the great doors behind us creaked open. Every guard along the wall stiffened, hands gripping axes, until Magny raised a hand to still them. 3 figures in hooded cloaks strode into the hall, their boots striking stone in unison. Late arrivals, Magny said with a grin, but not uninvited. The first lowered his hood, and my breath caught. Anduin. His golden hair spilled out, his eyes lit with a calm that only came from one who carried both burden and wisdom. He nodded at me, a knowing glimmer in his gaze. Beside him, Valdor pulled back his cowl, the old mage's lined face stern but kind, his staff leaning heavily in his grip. I told ye, boy, he rasped, I'd not leave this tale unfinished. The third remained silent as his hood fell, revealing the polished armor of a young king's guard. His jaw was set firm, his eyes sharp, but there was something in his look, the kind of measure one soldier gives another. Familiar, yet strange, as if across realms our paths had brushed before. Gasps rippled through the chamber, dwarves shifting uneasily. Magny let the noise roll before slamming his hand down on the arm of his throne. The hall fell silent. You'll not face this mountain alone, lad, he declared, his voice echoing. These 3 will be your shield, your counsel, and your hammer when you need one. If Mangleclaw can be tamed, you'll have the strength to see it done. If not, he glanced at Hammerlock, whose staff glowed brighter. Then the mountain will claim ye all, and Dunmorog will sleep easier knowing the beast lies buried once more. His gaze swung back to me, hard as granite. Men plan, lad, but kings chuckle. Ye wanted your chance, and now you've got it. Pray ye be worth the trouble. The hall erupted again. Guards stamping, dwarves clapping fists to breastplates, the sound rolling like thunder. Nimicie leaned closer, her lips brushing my ear. He meant that both as a blessing and a warning. I whispered back, my chest tight with the weight of it all. And I'll not forget it. The great doors creaked open, spilling a flood of torchlight across the polished stone floor. The vaulted hall was alive with the scent of roasted meats, fresh bread, and the faint tang of forge smoke carried in from the mountain vents. Gold filigree glimmered along the pillars, and the sound of boots echoed like drums on the granite beneath us as we stepped forward. Smiling and walking up to King Anduin, I used the name he travels under. Mark, it is so good to see you, my friend. So glad you came, and shook his hand. The warmth of old friendship was there in the grip, strong and sure. Mark, I don't know if you met my fiancée Nimicie. Nimicie, this is my good friend Mark Page, I said. Nimicie nodded, understanding the message instantly, and curtsied with practiced grace. Pleased to meet you, Mark, she said. Her raven hair caught the glow of the braziers, and her assassin's armor gleamed with silver clasps. Ye no be needing that here, lad, but keep it for the road, Magny spouted with a grin as he came up to Anduin, beard bristling, and opened his arms wide for a hug. His voice carried across the chamber like a hammer strike. Anduin, you've gotten fat, Magny said loudly. Not as fat as you, Magny, Anduin returned, laughing, and embraced his old friend. Their laughter boomed off the stone walls, rich and unrestrained, filling the hall like music. I openly laughed too and turned toward Valdor, who stood with his ever-present staff, eyes glimmering like coals under his hood. I clasped his shoulders and pulled him close. "Welcome, friend," I said and gave Valdor a hug. "I've got a sleeping potion bomb that would knock out a herd of oxen for a day. Should work on your bear for a few hours for you," Valdor replied, his tone as dry as old parchment. He handed me a small glass vial, its contents shimmering faintly blue in the firelight. "Now don't drop it or none of us here will be leaving for a week." Valdor chuckled, a rare sparkle in his tired eyes. I took the potion, careful with its fragile glass, slipped it into my riding pouch, and clasped his hand in thanks. Then Anduin spoke, his voice carrying the calm authority of both king and comrade. "Magni, Don, Nimicie, and everyone, this is my new personal guard, Captain Woods." Captain Woods stepped forward, the clatter of his boots sharp, his armor polished like a mirror. He clicked his heels and bowed with crisp precision. "I dare say Captain Woods here would rival even your service record, Don," Anduin bragged, a mischievous twinkle in his eye. Walking over, I extended my hand. "Oh, I know, Anduin, a famous hero in my realm as well. Good to see you again, Rob," I said. But Woods did not take my hand. He straightened, his jaw tight, eyes searching mine with suspicion. "I don't know you, Sergeant, so I'll thank you to call me Captain Woods. For now, at least," he said, his voice edged but curious, as though weighing every word. Anduin broke into a hearty chuckle that made the guards lining the walls glance at one another nervously. "Don, your forgetful mind is going to get your head cut off one of these days," he teased, walking over to Nimicie. He bowed gallantly, taking her hands in his, and greeted her with a warmth that softened his kingly bearing. We all laughed then, the tension loosening into camaraderie. The flickering light played across smiles, and even the guards allowed themselves the hint of a grin. Magni, with his booming voice, piped up once more. "I'm sorry I couldn't offer you the greeting your station deserves, Anduin, but come, everyone, into the dining hall for a royal feast of a breakfast." He bowed, his arm outstretched toward the high-arched door carved with runes of kings long past. Anduin placed a hand on his old friend's stout shoulder, a gesture of both affection and respect, and together they led us forward. The doors swung wide, releasing a wave of warmth, light, and the mouth-watering aroma of a feast fit for warriors and kings. The dining hall of Ironforge was nothing short of magnificent. A vaulted chamber carved deep into the mountain itself. Its stone walls glowed with the warmth of enchanted braziers. Great banners of crimson and gold hung from the rafters, embroidered with the hammer and anvil crest of the Bronzebeards. Along the walls, carvings of dwarves in battle, in prayer, and at feast told the story of their people, the artistry so fine it seemed the stone breathed with life. The long oak tables gleamed under the light, their surfaces polished smooth by generations of feasts. The great table at the center stretched the length of the hall, already laden with food fit for kings and armies alike, steaming haunches of boar, wheels of sharp mountain cheese, loaves of dark bread still warm from the ovens, bowls of spiced roots, and flagons of thick dwarven ale that caught the light like molten bronze. The smell of roasted meat and hops hung in the air, making even the guards along the walls swallow hard at the temptation. At the head of the table stood a single high-backed chair of black iron and oak, gilded at the edges, reserved for a guest of the highest honor. To its right was Magni's throne-like seat, solid and broad, carved with runes of kingship and might. To the left, a place of equal honor had been set, waiting for me. We filed in under the watchful gaze of the hall's guards and nobles. At a signal from Magni, I was directed to the left of the head chair, Nimicie at my side, her raven hair catching the glow of the braziers as she sat gracefully. Across from us, Valdor lowered himself stiffly into the place set beside Magni, his staff leaning within reach, eyes sharp despite his age. Anduin entered last. The hall rose to its feet, the murmur of boots and the scrape of chairs echoing through the vaulted chamber. He moved with quiet command, his cloak trailing, and made his way to the high-backed chair. Resting his hands briefly on its carved arms, he smiled. "Sit, all of you. Be comfortable. Tonight we feast as friends." His voice carried across the chamber, warm and commanding. The nobles and guards resumed their seats, the hall filling again with the clatter of plates and mugs. Anduin lowered himself into the high-backed chair at the head of the table, Magni settling proudly at his right, me to his left, and Nimicie beside me. Captain Woods, precise as ever, pulled out the chair at Nimicie's other side and sat down with military stiffness, his polished armor glinting in the firelight. His eyes stayed sharp, scanning the hall even as he took his place. Now the high table was set. Anduin, Magni, Valdor, myself, Nimicie, and Captain Woods. The line of faces glowing in the golden warmth of fire and feast. The air buzzed with expectation, a mix of friendship and formality. Servants poured in, quick and quiet, their aprons white against the dark stone. Platters of roasted fowl were placed near Magni, while silver bowls of thick stew steamed beside Valdor. Trays of sugared fruits and honeyed nuts followed, placed within easy reach of Nimicie and Captain Woods. Before each of us, crystal goblets were filled with golden mead, their scent heavy with spice and warmth. Magni lifted his mug first, rising to his feet with a grin that broke the heavy air. To old friends, new bonds, and the stubbornness of Zarts who never know when to stop fighting. The hall erupted in cheers, mugs lifted high, the sound of metal clinking against crystal filling the vaulted chamber. I felt Nimicie's hands slide into mine beneath the table, her smile bright and proud as she lifted her goblet with her other hand. Anduin raised his cup next, his voice steady, every word carrying the weight of his crown and the warmth of his heart. To those who sit at this table, and to the hopes of two realms, may trust be our shield, and may courage guide our steps. The toast rang out, echoed by the crowd, and I lifted my own mug, drinking deep. The mead burned sweet in my throat, the fire of dwarven pride thrumming through me. As the hall roared with laughter and cheer, the first plates were set before us, and the true feast began. Conversation would soon follow. Alliances, stories, rivalries rekindled, but for now the food and firelight carried the morning. I leaned into my friend Anduin's confidence. As much as I'd love to have my good friend Anduin beside me, I think I'd better face Mangleclaw alone. Even Nimicie will be cloaked in that invisible cape you loaned her. I don't want to hurt Magni's feelings, but his kind offer of you by my side is a bit much. Anduin nodded, the firelight catching the edge of his knowing smile. Then, clinking his glass with a spoon, he stood, his cloak falling around him like shadow and flame. Such a feast, Magni! Thank you, my friend! His voice filled the vaulted hall, carrying to every table. But I think since this is not a hunt, this is one friend seeking to help another, and should have the respect of privacy of such. But I propose another idea. Since we all have plans for being at the Zart Ranch for Winter's Festival, why not host a royal hunt of the Great Hill Grizzlies in Loch Modan? A great cheer erupted from the hall, mugs slamming against tables, boots stomping on stone. The roar of dwarves in unison shook the chamber like a battlefield cry. Anduin raised his hand to quiet everyone, his expression still bright with warmth. "Does that suit you, Magni?" he asked. A loud "Aye!" from Magni rattled the rafters, and again the hall erupted in cheers. Raising his hands once more, Anduin laughed. "Now this all depends on Mrs. Zart if she's willing to put up with us." "Aye, and welcome," came a clear voice from a few tables over. Anduin spotted my ma and pointed at her. "A round of cheer for the brave and noble Zarts, hammersmiths, and bronzebeards, please." The hall answered in thunder. Anduin lifted his glass and started the huzzahs for all three. The voices of hundreds echoed together, strong and fierce, the sound pounding off the carved stone walls like drums of war. After he sat down, he gave me a nod and I raised my glass to him. The feast shifted again, stories now flowing like river water, tales of bear hunts in Loch Modan, of narrow escapes and glorious kills. Even Nimicie leaned forward, her eyes alight, and shared the tale of the huge male she had taken down at very close range. A story that nearly stopped my heart just to hear. With bellies full and everyone eager for the trip, the hall slowly emptied. Boots scuffed against stone, voices spilled into the outer halls, and the smell of roasted meat and strong ale lingered in the air long after the tables had cleared. We all shuffled out together, warmth and expectation carrying us forward, ready for what lay ahead. Chapter 8, Between Worlds. Arriving at our chamber, Nimicie and I began gathering our things. The morning light streamed through the carved stone window, casting golden streaks across the room. Armor straps, arrows, and bits of traveling gear clattered as I packed. "You gonna take a quick bath?" I asked casually, glancing at her as she fussed with her hair. "No, we're gonna see a man-eating bear, Don. I don't want to smell like a spring meadow." She shot back, hands on her hips. I chuckled at her fiery response, but then noticed the large barge box sitting neatly on the bed, topped with a folded note. Scribbled across it in Magni's heavy hand were the words, Put these on and meet us outside the front gate. Magni. Hey, sweetie, we have a gift here, I called. Nimicie stepped out of the bathroom behind me, her long hair brushed back. I fumbled my words, correcting myself. Oh, sorry, we have a gift. I nodded at the box as I tightened the strap on my quiver. She crossed the room in a flash, her eyes wide. Oh my! Nimicie's voice carried awe as she lifted the lid. Don! Double-stitched, sheep-lined buckskins. 2 pair. I laughed and shook my head. Oh good, but damn it, I just strapped on my arrows. Oh well, start over. Together we dressed in the thick new buckskins, the warmth immediately wrapping us like a second skin. Once packed and ready, we left the chamber and made our way to the great gate where Magni's entourage was to gather. The courtyard was alive with bustle. Guards shining their pauldrons, dwarves gossiping from the shadows of the arches, the crisp scent of iron and wood smoke drifting through the air. But Anduin and his party had not yet arrived. That's when a creaking trader's wagon rolled into view. Its wheels clattered over the cobblestones, drawn by a pair of great oxen bedecked with bells and ribbons. Standing at the reins, as dazzling as a parade float, was none other than Kelsor. Sergeant Nimicie! He called, his voice sing-song and dramatic. The wagon jerked to a stop, and he climbed down with a flourish. Kelsor was impossible to mistake, tall and slender, his movements fluid as water. He wore a sweeping violet coat embroidered with silver thread, a silk cravat tied in a bow at his throat, and rings glittered on nearly every finger. His long night elf hair spilled down past his shoulders, streaked with indigo dye, and he leaned on the cart with wrists crossed delicately. Oh, good! I thought I might miss you two. He smiled with a mischievous sparkle in his almond eyes. Kelsor? I said, stunned. How the hell did you get here? He leaned close, lowering his voice as though sharing a scandal. Oh, I go everywhere, Sergeant. And no, I'm not the assassin you hunt. But thank you for thinking I could be. I'm much too cowardly, Sergeant, I'm afraid. He gave me a sly grin, then turned with theatrical grace to Nimicie. Nimicie, my dear, it is so good to see you alive. He reached for her hand, pressing it gently in his long fingers before giving it a shake as though it were the rarest treasure. Did you know, Sergeant, he went on, his voice carrying mock horror as he placed a hand dramatically against his cheek. The last time I saw her, your mother had a shotgun to her middle? Well, I made a hasty retreat from that situation, I can assure you. He finished with a tilt of his head and a sly wink. I couldn't help but smile. Nimicie smirked and shook her head at his antics. Speaking of dangerous... Kelsor pivoted back to his wagon and rummaged through an ornate chest, the bracelets on his wrists clinking musically. I just happened to find another set of Saron arrows, and I thought of Nimicie straight away. Sergeant, you'll find it interesting. This set comes with one special shaft, an unbreakable binding net. You've one in your set as well, Sergeant. All Saron sets match, you know. He held one gleaming green-fletched arrow delicately as though it were a jewel. And this, he added, producing a small jar, a gift of indulgence. A jar of magical topographical anesthetic skin cream, used by tattoo artists in the Southlands when they jab away with their shark-tooth needles. He pressed it into my palm. I'm all for suffering for art, but I've never seen a picture worth being stabbed thousands of times for. Nimicie and I both burst into laughter. Kelsor smiled in satisfaction, then named his price. Now, let's see. 3 gold for the Saron arrows, 1 gold for the salve, and you still owe me 30 silver for the last set. Shall we say 4 gold, 30 silver? He extended his manicured hand, a flash of jeweled rings catching the sun. 5 gold it is, Kelsor, and thank you, I replied, dropping the coins into his palm. He clasped them to his chest with exaggerated delight. No, thank you, Sergeant. You and your fiancé are quickly becoming my favorite customers. Oh, speaking of, how did those arrows work out for young Kylie? The ones you bought, not the set her father bought? He leaned forward, eyes keen with nosy delight. She got a nice bear with one, I said proudly. Right through the heart, dropped him in the stream. Beautiful shot. I clapped his shoulder. Her family's got meat for a good long while. Oh, good. Good for her. Kelsor's face softened for a rare moment, almost sincere. I'm sure her family needed it. Then, just as swiftly, his flamboyance returned. Well, I must be off to make sales. Ta-ta! He sprang back onto his wagon, adjusted his violet coat, and cracked the reins. The oxen lurched forward, bells jingling as Kelsor waved extravagantly over his shoulder. His voice floated back in a sing-song farewell. Don't get eaten by your bear, darlings. The wagon clattered down the road, ribbons fluttering in the wind, leaving Nimicie and I chuckling in his wake. The song faded into chuckles and breathless laughter, the rhythm of hooves still carrying us along. Nimicie rode close at my side, grinning under her hood, cheeks flushed red from the cold and singing. I leaned toward her and muttered, "That Kelser will keep me awake half the night, thinking about his sass and his silk ribbons. I swear the man leaves more perfume in the snow than a wagon load of dushes." She laughed so hard her mare tossed its head. "Oh, I, Don, and I saw the way he winked at you. You'd best hope I don't dream of him tonight, or you'll get no sleep at all." From a few riders ahead, Valdor twisted in his saddle and called back, "If that elf ever takes up permanent lodging in Dun Morog, the entire kingdom will smell like lavender soap and goose feathers." That had the whole company roaring again. Magni, riding a sturdy ram at the head, slowed just enough for Anduin to catch up. "Well, old friend," Magni rumbled, "what think ye of a proper bet? Since you're only staying the one day before you skitter back to Stormwind, let's see who bags the most game before sundown. Loser owes the other a barrel o' what's their best brew." Anduin chuckled, shaking his head. "Magni, last time we bet like this, you still owe me 3 casks from Ironforge cellars. Don't think I've forgotten." Magni bellowed a laugh so loud it startled the birds from the trees. "Then I'll win this time and pay ye double, ye schemer." Even Valdor and Hammerlock, normally quiet, got caught up in the merriment. They rode side by side at the rear of the column, trading mutters and hand motions until suddenly a spark of magic flared between them. With a joint effort, they conjured a floating fire pit, a glowing orb of warm orange flame cradled in a lattice of shimmering runes. It bobbed gently behind the line of riders, spreading heat without smoke. The dwarves cheered, some tugging their cloaks looser, grateful for the warmth. By the time we reached the base of the mountain, the sun was low, casting the snowfields in gold and rose. The company slowed, boots crunching into untouched powder as we dismounted. Magni strode to the front, his ram bowing its great head, and he dropped to one knee in the snow. Anduin did the same without hesitation, his knees sinking deep, bowing his head in respect for dwarf tradition. I reached for Nimicie's hand, gently pulling her down beside me. She went without question, her eyes shining, cloak falling about her like dark silk against the snow. Around us, dwarf after dwarf knelt, some even guiding their mounts into bows, horns and heads bent reverently toward the mountain. Valdor and Captain Wood stood stiffly at the edge, uncertain, looking out of place and awkward in the sea of bent heads. They exchanged a glance but said nothing. Hammerlock, tall and gray-bearded, walked slowly to the front. His staff left little spirals of frost where it touched the ground. He raised his free hand, first speaking in Dwarvish, the harsh yet melodic syllables echoing off the cliffs, then repeating in Common so all might understand. "Mountain, keeper of stone and storm, shield these travelers with your strength. Let no avalanche claim them, no frostbite take them. May the skies be kind, the weather fair, and the hunt fruitful. Mother Nature, we ask your bounty. Stonefather, we ask your patience. Guide our steps and guard our lives." As his words faded, the silence was deep enough to hear the sigh of the wind in the pines. Every knee pressed harder into the snow. The blessing was done. The prayer faded into the stillness of the mountain. Breath steamed in the crisp air, the last syllables of Hammerlock's blessing clinging to the rocks before drifting away on the wind. For a long moment, no one moved, as if the mountain itself was listening. Then boots shuffled, saddles creaked, and the spell of silence broke as the company began setting up camp. Snow was cleared, fires sparked to life, and dwarves bustled about with a cheer that seemed to keep the cold at bay. The base of the mountain soon looked like a small village. Packs opened, tools clanging, voices raised in half-sung drinking songs as the smell of pine smoke and fresh-cut wood filled the air. Valdor stepped forward, brushing snow from his sleeves, and produced a small black disc from inside his robes. He turned it in his hands, then offered it to me and Nimicie with a faint smile. "A pre-wedding gift," he said, his voice carrying over the camp noise. "I don't think you can use this while on your voyage, but you can here. Hold it in your palms, turn it to the right, then set it down in the snow and stand about 10 feet back, quickly." Nimicie pointed to a clear patch near the edge of camp, her eyes bright with curiosity. I did as Valdor instructed, placing the disc down and jogging quickly back to where she and Valdor stood. For a heartbeat, Nothing happened. Then, with a sudden shimmer of light, a large 10 by 10 tent sprang into existence. The whole camp erupted in cheers as the canvas walls took shape, complete with a wood chopping block out front, a skinning rack, and inside, glowing through the flap, the warm light of a fire pit and chimney already crackling with flame. Wow, I blurted, eyes wide. Yay, Nimicie squealed, clapping her hands like a girl at festival. Valdor held up a finger. I'm not done. He strolled to the tent, making sure all eyes were on him. Raising his voice, he announced, Dwarven hunting songs! And clapped twice, sharply. From nowhere, the sound of a violin burst into life, a lively tune filling the air. The camp roared with laughter and applause. Hell of a gift, old friend, I said, shaking his hand firmly. Nimicie threw her arms around him, her excitement spilling into a squeal that needed no words. Valdor wagged his finger at me. In the morning, pour water on the fire and get out quick. He gave me a knowing look, then shuffled off to set up his own lodgings. I stood holding Nimicie, both of us just gazing at the tent, listening to the violin's spirited melody. The glow of the firelight made it feel like home in an instant. But Anduin was not to be outdone. With a grin tugging at his lips, he produced a disc of his own. He jogged 20 paces out in front of the camp, dropped it, and sprinted back briskly toward Magni. Stand back, my friend, Anduin warned. Everyone instinctively took a step away. In a flash, a full hunting cabin appeared. 6 bunks, a broad stone fireplace, a porch with benches, and a neat log pile stacked at the steps. It looked as though it had been standing there for years, solid and welcoming. Anduin bowed deeply at the door, sweeping one arm toward the entrance. Magni, Mrs. Zart, Valdor, Hammerlock, and good Captain Woods, if you'd please. One by one they filed past him, the king still bowing until the last had stepped inside. Then, standing tall again, Anduin raised his voice. And for the rest of you, dwarf hunting songs! He clapped twice, and this time a full 4-piece orchestra rang out, brass and strings echoing across the camp, loud enough to rattle the branches. The dwarves howled with delight, stamping their boots, jeering and catcalling, some even making kissy noises to tease Nimicie and me. Anduin took a flourishing bow before ducking inside the cabin, leaving the music to play over the snowy camp. With music drifting from somewhere unseen, tents and lodges rose easily. Fires glowed, laughter bounced from one group to another, and the smell of roasting meat soon filled the night. When the dinner bell rang, there was no rank or title. Kings and soldiers, wizards and hunters, all gathered shoulder to shoulder at the long tables set out under the stars. The feast was hearty: roast boar, spiced potatoes, black bread, and casks of ale that seemed never to run dry. Stories of past hunts were swapped with gusto, voices raised in song, mugs clashing together until foam sloshed into the snow. Nimicie leaned against me, eyes sparkling as her laughter joined the rest. Late into the night, one by one, the campfire circle thinned. Bellies full, heads light with drink, each company slipped away to their bunks, tents, or conjured shelters. The songs softened to murmurs, and the camp settled into the deep silence of the mountain night. And there we left it, a camp of kings and commoners alike, bound together in cheer before the trials of dawn. Chapter 9. Mountain passes and forest fails. I awoke to find the blanket cold, the space beside me empty. Nimicie stood just outside our tent, framed by the pale light of dawn, watching the sunrise. A faint frost still clung to the ground, sparkling like shards of glass, and the sky was awash of pink and gold streaks stretching over the snowy peaks. Her dark hair fluttered in the breeze, catching the first warmth of the sun. It was cold, bone cold, but not too cold to dart outside in my boxers. I crept up behind her, wrapped my arms around her waist, and kissed the curve of her neck. She leaned her head to the side to give me better access, her chuckle rising with the mist of her breath. Pink sky in the morning. Sailor, take warning, she teased, her voice playful as I found a ticklish spot and lingered there. We're not sailors, I muttered between kisses, refusing to let her go. She reached behind to swat me away, and in doing so realized I wasn't wearing a stitch of clothing. Whipping around, her eyes went wide, then narrowed in mischief. In her best dwarven brogue, she barked, Mr. Zart, you get your arse back in that tent and get dressed. Before I could protest, she spun me around and delivered a sharp slap across my backside. You're a man, ye can take it, she declared, mimicking the exact scolding tone my mother used to give my father when she did the same. I stumbled forward laughing, but before I could slip back inside the tent, Nimicie turned to the camp with a wicked grin. Reveille! She shouted. At once, the blare of a bugle split the morning air, a bright military wake-up call echoing through the valley. All around camp, groans and curses erupted. Some dwarves threw blankets over their heads, others shouted their disapproval, and a chorus of boos answered the tune. Nimicie only folded her arms, chin high, and laughed so hard her shoulders shook. Watching her there, reveling in the chaos she'd just caused, I couldn't help but smile. The day at the mountain had begun. I packed quickly, slipping back into our new double-stitched, sheep-lined buckskins, making sure every strap, arrow, and blade was in place. The camp behind us was already stirring, dwarves tending fires, filling mugs with steaming ale, and sharpening axes for the hunts that would last the week. The air was thick with the smell of roasted oats, smoked fish, and bacon fat popping in iron pans. It was a feast of simple fare, but it warmed the bones and set the tone for the day. This was no ordinary hunting camp. It was a guard line, a living wall of steel and song, meant to stand watch while we climbed into the jaws of the mountain itself. The entourage would remain here, hunting the valleys, singing dwarven songs, and keeping the pass secure while we ventured deeper. After a quick breakfast, meat, bread, and spiced ale gulped down more for strength than for taste, the party was chosen. Magni, with his crown of braids and iron-set shoulders, Anduin, cloaked in quiet authority, Valdor with his restless hands brushing against spell components, Hammerlock the wizard who seemed always half lost in another plane, my mother Bethan standing tall with fire in her eyes, Captain Woods sharp as a drawn sword, and two of the king's elite guard with axes gleaming at their backs. Nimicie fell into place at my side as naturally as shadow to flame. The mountain loomed before us like a living thing, its peaks clawed the sky, jagged teeth biting into the morning light. Sheer walls of black rock veined with frozen waterfalls rose in every direction, and the path ahead was little more than a goat trail half buried in snow. Mist clung to the ridges, curling like smoke, and every now and then the wind would tear through the pass with a sound like 1,000 voices whispering. It was daunting, dangerous, spooky, yet hauntingly beautiful. The ice glimmered like glass, the snowfields sparkled as if scattered with diamonds, and somewhere far above a lone eagle circled, its cry carrying down through the canyon like a warning. The dwarves muttered under their breath, some prayers, some curses, as we began the ascent. Even seasoned warriors couldn't help but glance up at the sheer cliffs and shadowed caves as though expecting something vast and terrible to be watching. And perhaps it was. We moved up the narrow trail with wary steps, boots crunching in the snow, weapons close at hand. Breath steamed in the cold air, each exhale a little cloud that drifted and vanished into the white silence. Despite the danger, spirits were high. Magni at the front booming out old marching verses, Nimicie smiling faintly at his stubborn energy, and even my mother humming along like she'd done this trek 100 times before. About 15 minutes into the climb, Magni stopped suddenly, squinting at the air ahead. His beard bristled with frost, and he jabbed a thumb toward the rocks. "Out loud now," he muttered, half to himself. "That barrier be around here somewhere." "Twong!" The sound was like a drumstick slamming into a great gong. Magni staggered back a step as though struck by a smith's hammer, his crown of braids shaking. He planted one hand against the invisible wall and rubbed his sore face with the other. I think I've found it," he grumbled. Anduin toppled to the ground in a fit of laughter, pointing at his old friend. Did you hear the dinner bell, Magni?" He gasped between breaths. "Is it time to eat already?" We all chuckled as Captain Wood strode forward and hauled Anduin up out of the snow, brushing him off with a smirk. "Hammerlock!" Magni roared, his voice echoing off the cliffs. "Get your blasted arse over here and get this thing down!" Then he shot Anduin a glare sharp enough to cut stone. "Oh, ha! Ha! I no be seeing you lead! Ye soft-headed idjit!" he barked. "It's your mountain, Magni," Anduin said with mock solemnity, bowing with his arms spread wide and still chuckling, tears of laughter glistening on his cheeks. Hammerlock came forward at last, robes trailing in the snow, his face stern beneath the hood. Valdor joined him, already pulling powders and runestones from his pouch. Together they began their work, Hammerlock chanting in the deep, rolling cadence of dwarvish prayer, Valdor weaving high elven syllables sharp and crystalline. The air thickened, humming with power. Runes flared across the invisible wall like frost struck by lightning, jagged lines of blue and gold searing the barrier. The ground trembled beneath our boots, and for a moment it felt as though the whole mountain held its breath. Then, with a sound like cracking ice, the wall shuddered. Faint light shimmered across the air, bent, and finally fell away into nothing. The barrier was gone. Snowflakes drifted lazily in the silence that followed. Even the wind seemed to pause. Magni grunted, rubbing his nose one last time. "Next time, ye be walkin' in front, Anduin," he muttered. Magni squared his shoulders and turned to his two elite guards, both clad in blackened steel with heavy axes strapped across their backs. His voice rolled like thunder in the narrow pass. "You two? Front and center," he barked. They stomped forward, boots biting into the snow. "After our friends go through, no one or nothing gets past you. 6-hour shifts. I want 2 of you here 24/7. This pass stays sealed tighter than a brewer's keg." Both dwarves snapped their fists to their chests in salute. "Aye, Majesty." The rest of us gathered in a small circle, the weight of the moment pressing down heavier than the snow-laden clouds overhead. There were hugs, firm handshakes, and promises made in voices a little rougher than usual. Even Valdor, ever the stoic mage, clapped me on the shoulder with quiet sincerity. "Return with the bear, Don. Or at least, return." But it was my mother who broke me. Bethan Hammersmith Zart stepped forward, her eyes brimming. She looked me over like she was trying to memorize every inch of me, as though afraid this might be the last time. Her hands cupped my face, thumbs brushing over my beard. "Donnie, my sweet lad, ye best be sending me one of your message arrows soon. I'll not sleep a night till I hear from ye." Her voice cracked. "Your father's heart near broke when he thought he lost ye once. Don't make me bury ye twice." The lump in my throat was too big to swallow. I reached into my pouch and gently touched her wrist. "I gave Dad your hair," I whispered. For a moment, she blinked, confused. Then, with a trembling hand, she reached into her bodice and drew out the small dagger she always kept hidden there. She lifted her skirt just enough to cut a long ribbon from the hem of her dress. With slow, deliberate care, she pressed it into my hand, closing my fingers tight around it. "Then take this, Donnie," she said softly, "so you'll always have a piece of me with ye." I couldn't speak. I pulled her close, burying my face against her shoulder as she wept quietly into mine. The scent of her, warm bread, wool, and wood smoke, seared itself into my memory. Finally, I pulled back, kissed her cheek, and nodded. "I'll come back, Ma. I swear it." Behind me, Nimicie shifted uneasily. I turned, hardened my voice, and gave the order I'd been dreading. "Cloak on. From this point forward, you're nothing more than a voice out of nowhere." "Understood," she whispered. Then she vanished, the shimmer of Anduin's cloak swallowing her whole. Only the faint crunch of her boots in the snow betrayed her presence. As I adjusted my pack and prepared to head up the trail, Anduin clasped Magni by the arm, leaning in. "Keep the cabin. You know how to turn it back into a disc. Just press the hearthstone and speak the word I left you. I'll stay with you for the hunt today, old friend, before duty calls me back to Stormwind." Magni gave him a curt nod, then clapped him hard on the back. "Aye, good. Then we'll raise a mug tonight before you go." I glanced once at them both, then turned forward. The pass stretched on ahead, silent and waiting. We didn't look back. But I knew, standing behind us, etched in the snow like statues, 2 dwarven guards held their vigil, axes crossed before them, their breath rising steady into the morning air. The trail narrowed almost at once, cutting into the side of the mountain like a scar. Loose shale shifted beneath our boots, every step sending a rattling echo down the cliffs. The air was thinner here, sharper, biting into my lungs with every breath. Somewhere far below, the wind howled through the pass, rising up in mournful wails that clung to the rock like the ghosts of dwarves long dead. I walked with my shoulders squared, my hand never far from my bow, though I knew it would be near useless if we were truly about to face him. Nimicie's footsteps padded just behind me, invisible but not silent, the crunch of her boots reminding me I was not alone. Still, the thought of her cloaked and unseen carried a strange loneliness with it, as though I were climbing into this doom by myself. Snow began to drift more heavily, fat flakes carried sideways by a wind that smelled of ice and iron. The world here was white and gray, the kind of place where time seemed to stop. Even the sun, struggling to break through the clouds, looked pale and distant, casting no warmth, only a cold gleam across the ridges of stone. We pressed on. Ravens circled far above, their cries harsh and ragged, as though warning us away. Jagged icicles hung from overhangs like the teeth of some frozen beast. Once, the path narrowed so much we had to press our backs to the wall, inching along while a sheer drop yawned on our other side. My boots slipped once, stones tumbling into the abyss, and Nimicie's unseen hand clutched my sleeve before I could fall. I didn't thank her aloud, but I felt the squeeze of her fingers before she let go. As we gained height, the forest thinned and the world fell utterly silent, save for the rasp of our breath. No birdsong, no scurrying of animals, nothing but the crunch of our steps and the slow groan of the mountain settling in its age-old bones. It was beautiful, yes, but the kind of beauty that demanded respect, that reminded you how small you truly were. Finally, we reached a shelf of rock that overlooked a wide basin below, a place where the snow lay untouched, perfect as a shroud. Beyond it, the mountain rose again, black cliffs veined with ice, and somewhere within those ridges yawned the mouth of a cave. Even cloaked in snow, I felt it. That place breathed differently. Ancient, watching. I stopped, planted my boots firm in the drift, and let the wind whip against my face. Somewhere ahead, the beast waited. I tightened my grip on the bow, heart hammering, and whispered under my breath, "All right, Chili, let's see if you still remember me." And with that, we began the last climb.